our understanding of reality is very limited. We're not that much different than we were back then. We know about this from advertising and marketing. We know that there's an emotional connection to ads that is like a hook in people's brains. Magical stuff can happen, but that's where real magic happens.
Who are you?
I'm a CEO of the marketing measurement company.
Where did your love and fascination for magic begin?
I was like 4.5. I went to the magic shop. I was stuck. I was bitten by the magic bug at that point. I had an opportunity to go work in Vegas and make a lot of money. I called my dad and I said, hey, I have this opportunity. What do you think about it? And he says, if you want to fuck up your life, go right ahead. As a kid, I had a next door neighbor who was my best friend that was murdered by his father.
Oh my God.
He was mentally ill. That's pretty terrifying for a young child. Some of the best illusions that I do with cards, the skill is nothing. It's very, very simple, but it's the story behind it. I met my wife doing magic, which was my best trick ever. People forget why they got together in the first place. What was that spark in that person that made it special? My grandmother, she said, the only advice I have for you is never go to bed angry.
Who are you?
I'm Jeff Greenfield. I'm a CEO of Provalytics, a marketing measurement company. I'm a dad. I'm a husband, and I like to play and have fun. That's kind of been my mantra my entire life is if I'm not having fun, then why should I do it?
That's so funny. That's literally like one of my grandpa's like sage pieces of wisdom is he was always like, if it ain't fun, don't do it. That was his statement. So I love that's for you. I'm curious, like how has making fun your priority shaped your life?
Oh, it's kind of shaped everything. And I'll go back a little bit to where that statement kind of came from. I was at summer camp and my parents had sent me with like letters that you're supposed to write, when you go away to summer camp. Back when I was younger, you would send kids away for like a month or two. And I was there for about 3 weeks and my camp counselor said, Greenfield, your parents called in. They didn't even know you arrived. You were supposed to be sending a letter every week. What were you doing when I told you to send letters? I wasn't doing it. He says, you need to sit down right now and write me a letter to your parents. So I wrote this letter that said, I'm playing and having fun. I'm playing and having fun, and just wrote it over and over again. And so my parents had these letters of just, I'm saying I'm playing and having fun. And that just became my whole thing. But it's, life is supposed to be enjoyable. It doesn't mean it's supposed to be easy. It's definitely supposed to be enjoyable. And you should always be able, even in stuff that's not fun, that stuff that's tough, you should be able to try to find something fun in it. The people that you work with, the people that you hang out with, you enjoy their company. If not, it's time to change things. Like I remember when I was at University of Maryland and I went there for the weekend before, you spend like a weekend there to check it out during the summer and you meet a bunch of people. And back then this was like one of the largest campuses in the country, like 55,000 students on campus every day. So you meet some people and then it was the strangest thing. My first day there, I ran into like 4 or 5 of the same people that I saw, which was so cool. And I would see them every day. But I also noticed one day I left like 5 minutes later than I would normally do to go to my first class. And I ran into completely different people. So sometimes all you have to do is if you're not having fun, just shift your time around a little bit and a whole new world opens up. It's like if you go to the supermarket same time every week, you see the same people. But if you change your day or change the time of day, it's like it's a whole different world out there that you didn't even know existed at the supermarket.
Yeah.
So shift things around.
Yeah, no, I really I love that idea. And I think it's something that's talked about often is this idea of like, okay, like you got to figure out how to like make it fun or like make it enjoyable for yourself or do those things. I'm curious like for yourself because you obviously you work in marketing and you've built businesses and you've done a lot of amazing things. You've been a magician at the Magic Castle, you've been a chiropractor, you've had all of these different things. I'm curious for you. I mean, you just mentioned one of them with like being able to like shift the time around or when you do things. Like, what are your like I don't know, like your do you have a framework or anything of that, like what you do when you're finding frustration or when you're finding those moments where it's like, okay, this is getting really tough. I'm not enjoying this anymore. And it's still something that you love. Like, what do you actually do in those moments where you're like stuck and you're frustrated, but is this still something you want to do, but you're not finding that joy in it anymore?
That's a great question because there was a time in my life where I got in really deep and really felt that. And I was a chiropractor and I went through this whole thing where I was in a car accident and damaged a nerve in my arm, on my left arm, my ulnar nerve. And it it was pretty bad. And I tried to take care of patients and I couldn't anymore. Very, very painful. And then eventually they recommended surgery for me where they were going to decompress the nerve. And it turned out that the nerve was crushed and really bad. And even though they did the surgery, it was kind of a failed surgery.
Mm,
So it meant I wasn't going to be able to take care of patients anymore,
wow.
which for me was, I went to chiropractic college and loved it. I loved taking care of working with people. To me, that was the most, I thought I was going to do that the rest of my life. And so I hired a management company to figure out what I was going to do. So I hired doctors to work for me. And I went from this very small practice where it was just me, my wife, and one and a half people, essentially, one part time person and one full time person. And it was out of my house. And I went from that to having about 65 employees very, very quickly. And I was like 29 years old. I was not equipped for it, wasn't prepared for it. And it got to the point where it was the process for me was so not enjoyable that I stopped going into the office. And this is before email. So it people would I would have people fax in reports to me every day about how everything was going. And we took a trip to Disney and I remember getting like 30 pages of faxes a day. And it just kind of ruined the whole trip. We came back and my wife walked by. I had like a little office in the house and my head was down on the desk. And she said to me, she says, what's going on? And I said, I'm not having fun anymore. And she said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. I want to stop doing this because this is not good. So I stopped it. I literally shut down my one office. It turned into two clinics. I shut them down. And I said, I really need to kind of find myself because I didn't know, I had this vision in my mind that I was going to be this chiropractor and I was going to still work out of my house and I was going to be like 97 years old giving someone an adjustment. And I was going to go in the back and I was going to sit down and kind of fall asleep and my life was going to be over. And that's how I envisioned my life. And it was, everything we did was so built around that. And then all of a sudden I couldn't do the most important thing, which was take care of patients. Instead, I was like managing a business and I didn't want to be like a business person because that was not fun and still is not that those aspects I don't enjoy. And so I said, I'm gonna go back and do magic again.
Mm.
And so I'd found out from a friend about, these college conferences and stuff like that. And I essentially jumped back full time into magic after being a chiropractor to kind of go back to my foundation and reset. So for me, when things got so pressed up against the wall, I went back to what I knew best and what I knew was fun for me, which was magic.
Yeah. I I love that. And I have two or three different questions I want to like spin off of, but like I guess the first one that comes up to me is like, where and when did you like develop that mindset to be able to adapt and like let go of something that you loved so much to be able to go into like something that you did? Because I think a lot of people can get, and I can speak for myself, like I can get really stuck in something where I'm like, okay, I'm committed to something and I'm going for it or whatever, and then like the idea of letting it go can feel so terrifying. That's a job or a project or a friend or a relationship. It can get really easy to be kind of stuck in those things because letting go can be terrifying. So like how did you develop that mindset and that I guess that security within yourself to be able to let go and do that?
Yeah, I don't know. My wife, my wife says that there's that book, Who Moved My Cheese?
Mm,
And she always says that I'm sniff, is what she says on me, that I'm always, once I'm someplace, because I all day long, or several hours a week, I'm always tinkering with new stuff that has nothing to do with my business. I'm playing around with new technology. I love to tinker, and I'm always sniffing around new things. But I've also been, I've always said that I'm really, there's some people that when shit gets real, they fall back. There's that concept of being, is this someone that you would want to be in a foxhole with?
hmm.
I've I'm always someone that is always going to be there. I'll tell you what happened to me today. I was driving today this morning, going to get breakfast, and I came to an intersection, red light, and I saw people getting off the highway, and there was a guy on a motorcycle, and a car got too close to him, and his bike fell down.
Wow.
And I immediately jumped out of my car and started running towards him to ask him if he was
Wow.
okay. No, everybody else sat back. It shocked the hell out of me. And then a couple of years ago, we were coming back from dinner, and there was a backup where we normally, where the lanes go from 2 to 1. And I saw up ahead, people were slowing down because there was a car on the side that was smoking, and you could start to see that some flames were coming out of it. And everybody was just driving by. And as I got closer, I saw that there was someone in there, and I pulled my car over the side. My wife says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going to go yank that woman out of the car because everyone's just standing around like they're fucking idiots." So I reached in there, and you can either tell, I don't think she was inebriated, but she hit her head. I
Mm.
reached in for her, and she's just kind of laughing. And I grabbed her arms and just yanked her out of there through the passenger side, because the driver's side was locked up against the curb.
Jeez.
And then I moved her away from there, and there were other people standing around, and I went to go check on the other drivers, because people were just, so some people, I think they just get paralyzed when stuff goes down. I don't know why I'm wired this way in particular. Maybe it's because I had crazy stuff happen to me as a kid. I had a next door neighbor who was my best friend that was murdered by his
Oh my
father.
God.
And I was I was in the house with him, and then my parents, we were leaving to go do something, and as soon as I left, the dad came in and did it. He was mentally ill. It was a pretty terrifying thing. It was something that I didn't remember until I was much, much older. And then when I would tell the story of it, it wouldn't emotionally hit me. But maybe there's something that has to do with being so close to death at such a young age, even though he sent messages to my parents from prison that he wasn't going to hurt me. There's still that fear. And then also at 5, knowing that your best friend is gone, who is right next door, that you spent several hours a day with, that's pretty, pretty terrifying for a young child.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, if you're open to it, I'd love to kind of dig into that a little bit. So you're 5 when your best friend is murdered. Can you just kind of like walk us through what that experience was like for you?
Yeah, I mean, what I remember of it is that we were watching Heckle and Jekyll. So back then, the cartoons, there were very few, but
Hmm.
it was black and white.
Hmm.
His dad was in the back doing some gardening, and the mom was gone. And then my dad yelled over, "Hey, we're going to go." And we were actually going to look at another house. And we left. We literally came back 20 minutes later, and there were about 20 police cars surrounding our house and our neighbor's house. And we went inside. My parents went out, and I remember looking outside as well. And I remember them bringing out, I remember what the ambulance looked like. I remember them bringing out the body. It was covered, and there was a sheet that was bloody covering it, and putting it in the ambulance and taking it away. It was pretty scary. My mother told me that I had nightmares for several months thereafter. I would wake up screaming in the night. So, pretty detrimental thing to happen to a 5 year
Yeah.
old. My what I understand what happened is he came in and killed his son, and then he went after the baby with like a rope, and the wife walked in, and he dropped the baby, sat down on the bed, and waited for the police to arrive. So the younger child, is still alive. And I actually went probably about 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, and sat down with the mom and spent a couple hours with her talking through, what she remembered, what I remembered about her son and stuff like that, which, was, a good healing process and somewhat of a good closure for me as well, too.
Yeah. What was that like to sit down with her in that moment? I'm sure that obviously a very painful and challenging experience for both of you. I mean, that's something beyond words. I would imagine as much for you, probably 10 times for her. Like, what was that like to sit down with her and share about that experience for both of you?
Well, it was kind of interesting because she validated some things, invalidated some
Hmm.
others, in terms of the
Hmm.
ambulance as well, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
What did she?
but
Can you share more about that? Like, what did she validate or invalidate? And just for context, I'm
she
curious.
said there was no blood on the sheet,
Hmm.
but I distinctly remember standing outside and seeing that.
Hmm.
So it's tough to tell someone something that they know that they saw that they didn't see.
Hmm.
But I also respect the fact that neither one of us during that time were probably 100%
Yeah.
in the moment. So both of our memories are somewhat, scattered, if you
Yeah.
will, in that sense. It's got to be it when and that's the whole thing, is that when you're in that type of moment, when stuff starts happening that you cannot even imagine, sometimes the only thing you can do is really just forge ahead.
Mm.
And then your memories of what happened, you're left with your memories, but your memories may not be, I always talk about that life is like a car accident, in that the police show up and they talk to someone on one corner, and they say, "Hey, can you tell me what you saw?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, I saw everything. This is what happened, blah, 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 blah." And they walk across to the other side of the street and ask someone else. And that person has a completely different perspective. And so do the other people. So, and this gets down to, like, what is reality?
Hmm.
Is is reality what I see it as, and is what I see really real? And do I see the same thing that you see? And do I see the same thing that she saw in that moment? And how much of reality is made up of our own personal projections onto people and to other things? So I think at most, we get one tiny piece of what's actually going on. And then as we kind of, you know, walk to the other side of the street, we can get a whole different perspective on things. I think one of the issues that a lot of people have, and I had it too when I was younger, is that sometimes to walk across the street to look at the other side, sometimes it can invalidate what your opinion of things was before. And that can be painful, especially to your ego. And so some people just say, "Hey, I'm happy with my perspective on things," because you can't force people to cross the street.
Mm.
Um, as I've gotten older, I've tried to do a better job of listening and trying to see things from the other perspective. When I was in practice taking care of people, that was my job, was to both listen kind of feel what was going on, but then also understand where's those deviations at in terms of things there. So I think, for me, I think for her, it, the one of the best things for her out of that moment was being able to see me grown up, which she couldn't see in her own son. I mean, she still has another son and stuff, but I mean, I can't even imagine it. I did have something, interestingly now as we talk about it, similar happened to my wife and I with our daughter. Um, she was born, and a couple of weeks in, she stopped breathing. And we had to take her into Boston, into floating hospital, and it was the middle of the night. And they told us that we had to prepare for a funeral. And that was just one of the most devastating things. So, luckily for us, it did not happen. But for a brief moment, I could feel a little bit, a tiny, minuscule piece of what she felt. I can't imagine anything being more painful than to lose a child.
Yeah, especially at that young and in that way. Um, yeah, Jeff, there's so many things I want to pick up on from what you said. Like I'm a huge believer in what you said around perspective and reality, and that sense of like, there's so many different perspectives that exist in our world, and for me, it's something that I think I developed because my parents fought all the time, right? And I could hear them fight through the walls, and I could, over time, especially when I started to go around like 12 or 13 years old, I could listen to how they were not even arguing about the same thing a lot of the time, right? Or how one word, which could be interpreted in four different ways, was being chosen to be interpreted in the worst way possible, right? Rather than assuming that there's benefit or asking for clarity, like those listening techniques that you're talking about, which is, I think, something that I focus on so much is the art and aspect of listening. I think it's something that's allowed me to be really great at sales. It's something that's made me, it's part of why I have a podcast, because I'm just like fascinated by people and want to hear these other stories and perspectives. And yet, to your point, like I can feel at least frustrated by sometimes other people's lack of willingness or desire to hear out other people's, things, wanting to see things from another side of the street, as you would put it. And also, something that I can struggle with in sometimes wanting to hear so many different perspectives is it sometimes can be challenging to then feel anchored in, okay, what do I actually believe? Now that I've taken in data, and like something like, like yourself, like I've been through significant trauma with my dad being arrested and other things that I've had in my life where, I can talk with my mom and we both recount aspects of these stories differently, right? My mom remembers a specific moment that I have no recollection of whatsoever, and the way that period of time happened plays out completely different in my head. And so I'm curious, like when you have these different, contradictory pieces of information from other perspectives, like how do you navigate your sense of reality when reality from other people's perspectives is different?
Well, I'll give you a recent example. I won't say where exactly it happened at, just in case there's somehow the person is listening that they'll pick up on
Sure.
it. But this is someone that I would run into on a daily basis. And this person irritated me every morning with their greeting. They would say something to me that just really irritated me because it was a greeting in such a way that it would force me to have a response. Instead of just saying good morning, it would be something like, how's it going? Or what's up? But just the way it was said would just irritate the hell out of me, to the point where I even came home and I would talk to my wife about it. Like, this person is just such, I don't like them. I don't want to be around them. And I would go out of my way. I would change my schedule to avoid being around them because it would just mess up the whole day for me.
Mhm.
And then it became this thing. And my wife would say, did you run into them? I'm like, yeah, I ran into them. And I'm like, wow. Well, Then I realized I said, okay, I'm going to step back and I'm going to watch what happens. And I noticed that over a period of like just a couple of weeks, I noticed that that's their affect. That's their statement that they use with everyone else. Because what would happen is they would say it to me, and I would get so irritated I wouldn't even notice them saying it to other people,
Hmm.
and it just bugged the hell out of me. So I realized I watched them talk to other people, and then I realized that also I reminded this person of somebody else in their life because I had a conversation with, and I realized, okay, this person is picking up on this other person, and they're putting hooks in me, and I'm putting hooks in them because of what they're saying. And then I just stepped back one day and I said, I just need to realize this is who they are. This isn't what I'm sensing is a little bit of this internal irritation. It's they're projecting something on me, and I can make a decision to accept it or I can reject it. And by rejecting it, I mean I can't really do anything about it, but I can just consciously become aware of it. And as soon as I realized that's what it was, they just stopped irritating me. And now I kind of like them. I look at them in a different perspective. I've kind of walked across the street. But the way I did that is by putting the responsibility on me. What am I doing in it? How am I responsible for this? And that's one of the things that, when you have my daughter's now 32, and kids get in trouble. And whenever she would get into trouble, it's always about, oh, I got this issue, blah, blah, blah. And it, our kind of famous thing with our daughter is, you can't blame your shit on other people. So tell me the story again and let's go backwards. Let's go back and let's go back and let's find the point. Our goal was always to hear the story, to find that pivot point where she decided to engage. Because our feeling is that, we're all the number one cause of our own problems because we decided to turn left instead of turn right. We all can make a decision. And whenever you go back and do like a postmortem, if you will. So, for our daughter, it's like we always tried to teach her, hey, there's a point here at which you engage. Do you see that? Do you recognize that? That's kind of because you want to try to recognize when you get to that point, and your gut always guides you. There's always something where your heart rate goes up, or you feel like someone's tapping you on the shoulder, or trying to pull your shirt back so you don't engage further. But what happens is, as humans, we tend to ignore our sixth sense or whatever it is, this other intelligence that we have that tries to, help us avoid danger, if you will, and help us avoid, severe conflict that makes our lives more miserable. But we don't listen to it. We've been trained not to listen to it. So that's for me is that, I try to take some responsibility. I had something else happen to me a couple of weeks ago at a place I go for breakfast every morning. There's a guy there that comes in with a dog that's it's a service dog, but it's not really a service dog. He brings it in, the dog sits down. It doesn't have a collar on it or anything like that. And the people there talk to the dog and everything like that. They play with the dog. And so I saw he was talking to one of my friends as my friend was leaving, and my friend was playing with the dog. And I've had discussions with him before. And so I said goodbye to him like I normally do. And I leaned down to talk to the dog, and he barked at me. The man did. Don't touch my dog. He's a service dog. You should know better. Never touch a service dog. How dare you touch my service dog? Now, the guy way overreacted. But, I came home and I told my wife, I said, well, I got reprimanded today. Right? And I said, it's completely my fault. So I told her the whole story. And she said, how is it completely your fault? And I said, well, when I stood up and I looked over at him, he's normally like reading a book or something, and I noticed that he was intently looking at his phone, and I could see that there was something on his face that looked different, an expression. I don't know this man well at all, but this sense of like something's wrong, I'm hyper focused on something came across me. And I ignored that to my peril, to my fault. So that I completely on. That was completely my fault because I ignored um something inside of me that said, "Hey, stay away, danger." Essentially, is what it did. And it wasn't danger. It was just I got treated like I was an 8-year-old little boy. And guess what? He was right in doing that because he actually sent me some sort of unconscious signal to stay away, and I ignored it. So that was on me.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Just like being able to for yourself kind of replay back the experience to where you're able to pick up on, okay, like what did I do in this situation that causes what piece of information did I ignore, or what piece of information did I hyper focus on, or whatever it is that like, and then by making that decision, you're able to then look back and like correct it, kind of moving forward too, right? Because now you can be like, oh, okay, I'm going to be more aware of those kinds of signs in the future and be able to change your behavior versus simply, to your own point, like just being really mad at this person, and then, not that it necessarily justifies the reaction that he gave you, right, per se, but there's a sense of like, okay, cool, of agency that allows you to grow and develop and like stay empowered, rather than probably a lot of people could have spent that day or the rest of the week just ruminating about that one experience and how much of a jerk this guy is, right? Like there's that possibility as well. And so you're able to look back at it, reframe it, and like see your own self like in that.
Yeah, I mean, I laughed about it for about a week, and my wife and I talked about it because I kept saying, I got reprimanded and it was my fault
Mm-hmm.
because I was completely 100% responsible. Now, I keep my distance from him.
Mm-hmm.
I actually saw him this morning, but I don't even, it's there's a great country music song out there right now by Caitlin Butts called "You Don't Have to Die to Be Dead to Me." It's just absolutely. We listen to country music in the house because I can understand the lyrics and I can hear them. And classic rock, we listen to a lot of that too, but country music, the lyrics are fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And I highly recommend anyone listen to this song, Caitlin Butts, "You Don't Have to Die to Be Dead to Me." So he's still alive, but I don't see him anymore. He's not in my field of view, and I don't communicate with him because that's the way he wants it. And I should have respected that
Yeah.
in the first place.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I appreciate that insight. I kind of want to take a pivot into your magic career. Like, where did your love and fascination for magic begin?
It began when I went to Walt Disney World in Orlando, um, back when I think I was there when they were open for like a month and a half. So this is in the late
Hmm.
'60s. And I went to the magic shop, which used to be all magic. In fact, the one in California, Steve Martin worked at as a
Yeah.
magician. And I went in there, and the magician did this trick, this famous trick with he puts these two sponge bunnies in my hand, and he said abracadabra, and I opened my hand, and it was filled with baby bunnies. And I was like, I can do that. I can do that. And I took the two big rabbits, I put them on my hand and waved my hand over it and said abracadabra and opened it up, and it didn't happen. I was stuck. I was bitten by the magic bug at that
Mhm.
point. And so that kind of started my journey. I think I was like 4.5,
Mhm.
and I was just absolutely amazed by that. So I started getting into magic, and I started reading as much as I could on things like about close-up magic with cards and coins. And I'm a little guy. I'm 5'4", 5'5", on a best day. So my my hands are small too. And all of these tricks, a lot of these magicians are like 6 feet tall. They have these massively large hands. They can hide a card. So, and back in those days, there were no DVDs or videotape. Everything was like illustrations where they would have one picture of a move and lots of words describing it,
Mm,
which to me these days is still, that's the best way to
mm,
learn, in my opinion. So I kept reading all of this stuff. Of course, I couldn't do any of it at all until I think I was like 13 or
mm,
14. All of a sudden, my hand got to be the right size. All of a sudden, all of the learnings kind of took over. But it was around 7. I had tricks, that kind of worked by themselves. And I started doing, I remember we found out that there was a magic shop where I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida. It was called Bob Hutchings Magic
mm.
Shack. It was this magician, and he had a shed in his backyard, and he tricks that he sold and tricks that he made. And like the first Saturday of every month, he would have a get together, and other kids and performers would perform stuff. And we found out about it from a kid. I was like 7. We found out about it from a kid that my dad knew his dad. He was like 16 years old, and we went there, and I saw this kid perform, and I was hooked. So we started buying tricks, and I think at 7, 7.5, because this kid had a business card. I
Mm.
told my dad I wanted business cards, so we made up business cards. It was Jeffrey the Great. I had my phone number on there, and I think it was around 8 years old. I did my first magic show for $5 for a friend's birthday party. And then I started doing more and more birthday parties. And then I got to the point where I was making $25 and I would do 2 birthday parties in a weekend. And it just started building up from there. And, what I realized over time is that the tricks work, but doing a great trick is 99% the story behind it and how you present it. In magic lingo, what we would call the patter.
Hmm.
The reveal in the trick itself is a very small aspect of
Mm.
it. Now, close-up magic is a little different because there's the skill that's involved, but still, some of the best illusions that I do with cards, the skill is nothing.
Hmm.
It's very, very simple, but it's the story behind it, and it's how you present it. So I kept doing more and more shows. And then as I got into high school, I started working. In my last year of high school, we moved to
Mm.
Maryland. So I started working at a restaurant doing magic there when they were busy on the weekends. And then I started doing more and more of it throughout college. And then when I moved to Southern California to go to chiropractic college, I was in the area for the Magic Castle.
Mm.
And I was like, this is like my dream, but you have to be 21 to be there. And I was only, I was only 19 at that point because I skipped a grade and finished, got early admittance to chiropractic college. So I, I fudged my year so I could get in there at 20 instead of 21 and auditioned and then became a member and started working there.
Wow.
And then I also worked at other restaurants in the area as well too, primarily doing cards and coin magic,
Oh.
and loved it.
Yeah. What was it like for you to be working at the Magic Castle? And I just for context for most of the audience who maybe doesn't know the Magic Castle, it's a very, very famous and exclusive um, magic restaurant, essentially, is what you would call it, or magic club, essentially, where you can go and they have some of the best magicians that perform there. It's basically members only or invite only to be able to even watch the shows. So it must have been an incredible experience for you at that age. Like, what was that like to actually be working there?
It was just the absolute wildest thing. It was a dream come true because, I grew up in knowing that Johnny Carson, who was a
Hmm.
magician, every night after he filmed The Tonight Show would go there and hang out.
Wow.
I mean, when I joined there, Cary Grant was on the board of directors. I mean, so that's the level of like but more important than that, I would go there to just hang out because this famous magician, his name is Di Vernon, and he was this legendary card sleight of hand artist that, as he got older, the castle kind of moved him to Los Angeles, gave him a place to live, and he would just hang out there, and I would sit down next to him and watch him, in his 70s and 80s do these most ridiculous moves that never in a million years would I be able to do. So you're just in awe of his skill. And he would just sit there all afternoon. And it's just wild now. I look back on it and I realize I didn't take in as much as I could have. I wish I had spent even more time there, but I was going to chiropractic college. This was like a side thing, but it was still just absolutely amazing. But still it's interesting because my wife always reminds me of this story, which was very important for her. I had worked there on and off, and then we got engaged, and then I was working there again. And I was working, I think that week I was working the late shift. So it's like you do a show at like 10, 11, and 12. And the castle's wild because there's like 7 bars in there. Magicians, we love our bars and we love our magic. So part of the deal was the pay there was just horrible, but part of the deal was you would get dinner. So my fiance, my wife and I, her fiance at that time, we went at around 8 o'clock to sit down and have dinner. And we sat down, and this other famous magician sat down with us. And I said, "Can I help you?" He says, "Yeah, I've watched your show a couple of times. I want to talk to you. I'm having dinner with you tonight. I want to talk to you about your career." And I said to him, "No, you're not having dinner with us. I'm having dinner with my fiance. Thank you very much." And I pushed him away. And my wife was like, now in these days we look back on it and I'm like, I can't believe that I did that. But, I had my priorities. My priorities at that point was her. She was number one. Magic was fun, and school was was in second or third place at that time because I had to finish school. I had to get done with it. And magic was fun for me, plus a good way to make money too.
Yeah. Why, like with your love for magic, I'm curious why didn't you pursue like a career in that? Like, why were you going to chiropractic school? Why were you, what made that the third priority for you at that point in your life?
Well, if I go back, I wasn't sure if I was going to go to chiropractic college or medical school because I have a lot of, not my immediate family, but I have a lot of uncles and cousins that are physicians. And I remember going to some family event and my uncle was there and he said to me how great life was as a physician. He was a radiation oncologist. And he told me that he walks into his clinics and people call him baby Jesus because people come to him and they're in horrible pain and they're being told that they have a month left to live. And through radiation oncology, he's able to get rid of their pain and give them 6 months. And I saw this massive God complex in him. And he said to me that he would guarantee my admittance to University of Florida Medical School. And he said that after medical school, I would do a radiation oncology internship and that he would guarantee me when I got out of the internship that he would pay me a salary of $1 million a year. And I looked at his life. He was on his second marriage. He had gone through rehab a couple of times. And I saw a very unhappy person who said he was having a lot of fun, but it didn't sound like it was fun to me. And so, unbeknownst to him, his discussion with me made me decide to go to chiropractic college. So I'm in but one of the reasons I wanted to go to chiropractic college is that it used my hands. And the type of magic I did was primarily close-up magic, so that tactile aspect of it. But when I was in LA at that time, and this was like 85, 86, magic had not yet exploded in Vegas. It wasn't a big thing. But around 87, magic was taking off in Vegas. And I had an opportunity to go work in Vegas and make a lot of money. And I looked at that and I really thought to myself, I thought, what I can do is I could literally take a year off after I graduate, take my boards, so I'm licensed, take a year off, work in Vegas for a year, and pay off all of my student loans and have enough money to open my practice up. And I'll never forget, because my wife and I talk about this all the time. I was in like the quad. I was on, I had a payphone. Back then there were payphones everywhere, there's no cell phones. And I called my dad and I said to him, I said, hey, I have this opportunity. What do you think about it? And he says, if you want to fuck up your life, go right ahead. And I was like, so first off, I'll never forget that. And I remember being just like, that is the most irresponsible thing that a parent could ever tell a child, you know? And I wasn't a child at that point. I was 20, 21.
Right.
I was still young.
Yeah.
But, I felt like the chiropractic was the right direction for me. And I found a lot of fulfillment, incredible fulfillment with working with people and stuff like that. But going back to the thing that my father said to me, I said to myself, that is the worst thing that a parent could say to a child. I would never, ever be in a situation like that where I would ever say that. But I have to be honest. I've never said it, but there have been so many times where I've had to stop myself from saying it. So I'm thankful that my father said it to me, that I could remember what it feels like so that I wouldn't say it to my own daughter. And so that's a tough thing, that one of the things that you want to do, at least for me, when you have kids, like I made a decision, like I got beaten up as a kid by my father because that was all the rage back then. Beaten up, belt, sent to the hospital, bad beats as a kid. And I made sure as a young kid, I said, I'm never, ever going to put my hands on my child. But I got to say, saying that statement that he said was probably worse than beating up a child, because it's pretty impactful. But it taught me a great lesson, which is I'm never, ever, ever going to say that. And I think any parent has felt where they want to say that to their adult child. But again, like I always talk about with the car accident, walking to the other side of the street, what I see and what she sees in her life are completely different. Well, if I go back, I wasn't sure if I was going to go to chiropractic college or medical school, because I have a lot of, not my immediate family, but I have a lot of uncles and cousins that are physicians. And I remember going to some family event and my uncle was there, and he said to me how great life was. And it's her perspective is totally different. I can never, ever, ever, ever comprehend what she sees. I can guess. And this idea that, your kid is made up of you and your partner. And so you can kind of come to what they see, but you really can't. They're their own individual. They're living in their own world. So you can't put that type of stuff on a kid, and you have to, or another adult. You can't do that to them. You have to kind of hold back and respect what they do, because what they do is the right path for them, and they have to learn their own lessons. So that was, my dad, I think, was trying to make sure I wouldn't do magic. But the reality was I could have made more money doing magic than I did as a chiropractor. The lifestyle was completely different because you're working nights and weekends. You're traveling a lot. It's definitely not conducive to having a family. It's you're in the entertainment
Hmm.
business. So it's not great for being a healthy,
Hmm.
long life type person. It's kind of a fast and loose type of business. So I think, I understand where he was coming from, but I am thankful that he said that because it taught me a great lesson that I use every day with my own daughter.
Yeah. Did you end up like listening to him and basically just going straight into chiropractic school, or did you choose to go into the magic in Vegas for that year?
No, I stayed in
Mm.
chiropractic, but it wasn't because of what he said. If I had decided to lean in on the magic, I would have done it. I think I was at like you could say a tipping point. I really wasn't sure
Mm.
because I loved both equally as well. We all know sometimes we have a decision to make and we're leaning in more in one direction than the other. And I really wasn't, but I had so much fulfillment about working with people. There's something really special about being present with someone when you're working with them. My philosophy when I took care of patients is that people would always come in every day. People called me Dr. Jeff. They'd say, Dr. Jeff, thank you so much, Dr. Jeff. And I would always say to them, you know, and I'm not a religious person. I'm a spiritual person, but I would say to them, listen, I just moved your bone. It's you and God took care of the healing. I just got out of the way. So there's something, I don't know, there's something very special about that you you get you get part of that when you're on stage,
Hmm.
but being on stage is great. Doing magic is amazing because it's a big ego push for you. Hell, I mean, I met my wife doing magic, which was my best trick ever, which was absolutely amazing. So for me, magic fulfilled everything and more. I mean, that's why they say guys get into magic is to meet girls,
Hmm.
and I didn't necessarily get into it for that, but the end result was fantastic.
What was the trick that won your wife over?
She came into a restaurant that I was working at. It was in Newport Beach. It was called the Reuben E. Lee Restaurant, which was this paddle wheel boat that
Mm.
was on the water. It was permanently docked. This place seated like 300 people, but every night there was a wait. John Wayne used to drink in the bar there.
Wow.
So it's gone now, but it was a legendary place. So she came in for her 22nd birthday with her grandfather who was visiting and her roommate. And I told the waitress that I was going to pick up on her. And she said, yeah, you say that about everyone. But I had never done that. And I used to do this. I did this card trick where I would have someone write their name and phone number on the card. And then I would make a joke about how I would auction the cards off to truck
Mm.
drivers, supplement my income. And so I kept going back to the table and I just loved her laugh. I mean,
Hmm.
my wife just laughs constantly. And it was just so infatuating. And she was just drop dead gorgeous. I mean, this was like, I was definitely, I was in a league where I definitely did not belong at all, but my magic kind of got me there. So I went home that night. So I did that trick, kept going back. And at night, I'm back in my apartment and I'm like pacing and I'm like, I'm going to call her. I'm going to call her. And it's now approaching midnight. And it's like a school night too.
Yeah.
So, she probably had to work the next day. So I called up and I said, is Cheryl there? And she said, yes. And, her roommate gave her the phone and, you know, her Cheryl asked, who is it? She's like, I think it's that little magician fellow. Yeah. She says, hello. And I said, yeah, this is Bob. I'm a truck driver. And I was in Coco's and this little magician guy came in and he said that, if I gave him $5, he'd give me your phone number and that you'd show me a good time. And she started laughing. And I said, this is Jeff. Would you like to, have dinner and see a movie? And she said yes. So I let her choose the restaurant in the movie, and she chose an Italian restaurant. And then the movie, I thought we were going to see The Golden Child with Eddie Murphy
Hmm.
because it was playing at the same theater. And I'm like 2 hours into this movie, and I'm seeing like Jeremy Irons is in it, and I'm like, when is Eddie Murphy coming in? And she took me to see The Mission.
Hmm.
It's a 3.5 hour Academy Award winning movie, uh, a very involved movie. And she did that to see, am I just like completely a trickster and a
Hmm.
jokester type person, or can I actually have a serious conversation? Um, and then, and we've been together ever since. That was, well, let's see, this year, I'm looking down at my arm because I have the date that I met her there
Wow.
on my arm, December 15th, 86. So this year on her birthday will be 39 years ago that I met her. And I have tattooed right here the card with her on
Oh
it.
my
So I
gosh.
want her to lose it. So I still have that.
That's so
Yeah.
cool. Wow.
Yeah.
That's such a beautiful love story. I love that. Um, what obviously you've been in a long marriage, and a lot of people like relationships, dating is like one of the more, it's like challenging areas in my life for sure, and in a lot of people's lives. I'm curious, like what's your advice, for lack of a better question, like around relationships, dating? What's made your guys' relationship be such a beautiful relationship for so long?
But we're still dating.
Hmm.
That's number one. I mean, since we've been together, we go out on a date every week. We make it special. I remember when we went to move in together, I was asking her to move in together with me. And from like very early on, I was against living together back in those days. But something told me inside, I was following my gut then. Um, and she was like, and then she had a roommate situation, and she needed a place to live. And she's like, let's get a place together. But she said, it's important to remember though, she's like, when you come over to my place now, you know, even if it's after work, you know you're coming over here. It's an event, you know, you look your best. It's an event, even if we don't go out, even if we just hang out and chill, it's still a thing. When we move in together and get a place together, when I come home from work, I'm just coming home. It's not going to be special.
Hmm.
So we have to make sure to keep things still special. That's important. I think that's what happened in a lot of relationships is people forget why they got together in the first place because all of life's crap kind of piles on you and you forget about what was that spark in that person that made it special. And I think it's because people kind of stop working towards dating each other. My wife always says audition, audition, audition. When you're dating, you're trying to win that person's heart
Hmm.
and you're auditioning. You're on your best behavior. You say the right things and stuff like that. But then you stop auditioning
Hmm.
and then it just becomes a chore. And then people get bored in their relationships. I still send my wife flowers. I still surprise her with flowers. It was just like 2 weeks ago, we were in a restaurant and I had flowers delivered there just because
Hmm.
it was one of our dates. And we sat down to have a drink and they brought out these beautiful flowers for her. And she is still surprised because I'll either have them there when we show up. I'll instruct them to only bring it out at the end when they bring me the check. I don't want her, I want it to still feel like it's special. So I make sure that she feels at least as close as she can feel like when we were still dating. And I think that that's probably the most important thing everyone always has fun dating and then the relationship gets serious, you have kids and then you forget to date.
Hmm.
I have friends of mine that I talk to about this and they're like, Yeah, we actually haven't been on a date in years. And that's, or what they'll do is they'll do a trip where a family member will come in and watch their kids and then they'll go away for a week. And I don't know if so those concentrated trips, they rekindle the love and the relationship a little bit. You have good sex while you're away for a week. And then when you come back, you're right back into the grind of it. I think the secret is to instill those weekly dates. So that love is part of your weekly routine, if not your daily routine. I still tell my wife every day how beautiful she is. I tell her that I love her. Uh, Probably I'm a real pain in the ass to her in terms of how often I tell her that, to the point where she doesn't believe me anymore, but I still do. So it's just, you know, that to me is the thing, is that, I had, it goes back to what I said in the beginning. I got to have fun,
Mm,
and dating is fun. Trying to, that part of that pursuit
mm,
for me was fun. Everybody wants to, win the prize.
mhm,
So, I won the prize. Do I just, keep going off and trying to win something else? No, I have to constantly win her heart over every day. That's my continual job, I feel like, in the relationship.
mm. Yeah, that's beautiful. I really loved what you said around that idea of it's almost like finding like mastery with her in a sense. Like I'm getting like I play a lot of video games, and so like one of the things you do with a video game is when you're playing a boss or a creature, right? Like you learn how to beat it, but then like as you go through, you start to develop a cadence with it, right? And you start to learn like its moves and its patterns and its little things, and it's like as you figured out what won her heart originally, right? But then as you continued the relationship, you figured out, okay, well, like her mind is going to go here. She's expecting the flowers at this point. So I'm not going to do that this time, right? You're going to throw in a wrench in this other way to continually find ways to surprise and delight her and keep the magic alive between the two of you, which I think is beautiful. And I think the other piece that I noticed is like the emphasis on doing something to keep things special. Because I think that to your point, like, with relationships, it can be very easy to get into whatever your pattern is, or like it becomes a sense of comfort, right? And I think there's, on one hand, there's like a need for that. There needs to be a place where you can let go and you're not having to put on airs or performance all the time, right? And at the same time, like it is those like sparks where you're bringing your best to these moments very intentionally for the two of you that allows that like that spark to stay alive throughout that journey. And I love how you've been so intentional about that. That's really, really cool.
Thank you. Yeah. One of the hardest things is that when you're together as long as we have, you also, know everything about that person.
Hmm.
And so when you have, when they piss you off, or you irritate them, and everyone knows this, who's been in a relationship for a long time, you can go 0 to 100 really, really fast, incredibly fast. And so I don't want to say that it's always easy, because it's not. You know, the dating keeps things on an even keel. I remember when my wife and I moved across country, when we came back after I graduated chiropractic college, we stopped off in Savannah, Georgia to see my grandmother. And she gave us some advice that I thought was really silly. I thought it was so easy. She said, "The only advice I have for you is never go to bed angry."
Mm.
And I was like, you know, we were engaged at that point. There was nothing that she could do. She could have kicked me in the ankle and broken it, and I wouldn't have been angry at all. Okay. At that point, you're not even into the relationship at all. There's nothing that she could have done to make me angry. As I've gotten older, what I've realized is that you never want to wake up angry from something happened the day before. Every day is a new day. And if you consciously make a decision to have a fight or a disagreement that happened on a Monday, if you wake up Tuesday and want to bring it up again, well, that's on you.
Mm.
That, because for the most part, a new day, the sun goes down, it's dark, everything's refreshed. The whole world is reborn again.
Mm.
And you can leave that stuff alone. So I think the key to a long-term marriage is to understand that, stuff that happened yesterday is yesterday. It doesn't need to carry over into the next day. And kind of our rule is if I bring it up, it's at my own peril. Because I've sometimes brought things up and my wife has looked at me like, are you fucking kidding me? Are you really that stupid? Guys, we're really kind of dumb. And then she reminds me about that rule. That is the extension of my grandmother's rule. And it's super, super smart. It really, really is. Because nothing is that important to bring up again in the next day. Everything looks much better the next day, without a doubt.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that. Definitely some sage wisdom. And I love that you broke down the importance of I want to say a piece of advice that I think so many older, especially older generation, long-term marriages have said, right? That sense of don't go to bed angry. But I love the breakdown of it and the sense of how the world is born again the next day. And so you have the opportunity to move on, or you can keep dragging that past with you, and that choice is up to you.
Right. And, it's just, I think those are probably the two biggest pieces of advice, but definitely the dating piece, because that always gives you something to look forward to. Mm-hmm. Life is not easy. It's got rough spots for all of us, without a doubt. But when you have a date with someone that you're really hot for, and maybe you'll get lucky. There's always that chance, right?
Yeah.
That's the way I always approach it, is that, this could lead to something really, really good.
Yeah.
So I still approach our dates like it's like our first or second date.
Wow.
For real.
That's beautiful.
Because that to me is the best kind of mindset to have.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious for you with the dating and then the hardships of life and the hardships of the relationship. I'm sure at various points, what do you do to bring your best in those dates when the rest of life is kind of at one of those shit points, or your relationship is in maybe a rougher spot than you would prefer it to be at that point in time? What do you do to still make sure that you have that special moment?
Well, you just have to focus in on the beautiful person that you're with. The other stuff is still going to be there. And even sometimes even though you put it out of your mind, it's still there. It still overhangs the day, if you will, especially if you had a crappy day or something like that. But there's a point at which you have to kind of put that stuff aside, because you've got a hot date. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I hate to put it to I'm 20 years old again, mm-hmm. but I mean, everyone knows that when you have a hot date, who cares that your car's broken down or that, you have a negative balance in your checking account? Can I borrow $20 because I have this hot date, man? And maybe I'll get lucky. I mean, it just comes down to being inside, just still a young boy who just wants to have fun.
Yeah.
So that's what it's all about for me. I mean, I know that other people, we typically go to some of the same bars and the same restaurants, and we're sitting there and we'll have a glass of wine, and, we get a little tipsy, and then, you got two 60-year-old people making out at the end of the bar. And I'm sure some people are like, oh God, it's them again. But I know a lot of people like it because, I really, I'm wicked hot for her. So, and it's, I just focus in on the younger version of myself. Because, I always say that if it wasn't for mirrors, I don't feel like I'm 59. I don't feel like I'm 59. I still feel like I'm like 18, 19. And if there were no mirrors or video calls where I could see
Mm,
myself, I would think I'm 18 or 19.
mm,
I think that's one of the interesting things about as you age, your body forces you to slow down. Your mind gains this amazing perspective on things, but you still feel like, at least to me, 18 or 19. My wife still feels like she's 30,
mm.
but I think guys were always younger, just because of the way it is.
Fair enough. Um, well, we've covered so much of your life and your journey so far. We've gone through magic and chiropractic school and your beautiful marriage and going back to magic. I'm curious, how did you end up going from all of that into um, marketing, where you've built previous businesses, now you're doing Provolytics? Like, can you walk us through that journey? How did you end up in that field after all of this?
So when I decided to get back into magic, I found out about these college events. Like, when you go to college and there's on your tuition, there's this thing called your student activities fee, which is a small part of it. So on campuses, that money all adds up to a huge
Mm,
sum. And they use that money. The Student Activities Council on every campus brings on like speakers. So every speaker, entertainer, band, that money goes to pay for them, pay for their transportation and things like that. So I found out that there was this organization called NACA,
mm,
and that the way that colleges find these people is that during the summer, there's conferences, regional conferences, and a national conference. So the southeastern colleges, all the head of the Student Activities Council and their bunch of people, they go to this conference. And at the conference, they have like the top performers performing. And then what happens is students will say to like Dane Cook, hey, we want to book you for this weekend. And Dane's price, let's say, is $30,000 for one date. But if you can find another college within a 2 hour drive and you book each other within 2 days of each other, Dane's price comes down to 28 grand. So one college wants you and then they book you. And then what ends up happening for the entertainer is you have a whole week or 2 weeks all planned out, all within driving distance of each other. And then the colleges will share in your transportation to the area. And so it makes your life a lot easier because otherwise you're flying to Florida one day, then you're flying to Minnesota the next. So I went and put together a tape. I performed magic in a restaurant, hired a videographer, edited it, and sent it out. And I got notice that I was able to perform at every one of the
wow.
conferences all over the country. And then I found out that there was a magazine that they distributed to everyone there. And this is now, let me think what year. This is like 1996, 95, 96. So the internet is just coming out. And I decide I want to buy a half page ad and I want to have a website because no one's going to have a website. This is so new. All the kids, the college students will notice this. So I look in our local newspaper and there was a company advertising. The company that actually owned the newspaper was advertising they make websites. So I go in and I tell them what I'm doing. And they're like, okay, come back next week. Went back next week and they said, we bought you a domain. I didn't even know what that was. They were like, magic.com was not available. So we bought magic-magic.com and we bought web hosting. And we're now, look at these cool things. They made like a rabbit and a hat,
Mhm.
just standard like clip art. And we're making it up. We'll have something else to show you in a week. And I'm like, great. And I'm like, so www.magic-magic was my domain.
Mhm.
So I then could buy the ad.
Mhm.
So I kept going back every week, every week. This is now like mid-July. This is May. The conferences started, I think, the end of
And what
June.
year is this roughly, just for context?
This is like 95,
Okay,
I
wow.
think. Either 95 or
It was
96,
really
okay?
early on the website thing, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going in every week and they're not making any progress. So now it's about a week before the first conference. And I'm like, guys, I have this conference. I have all these ads. It has the address. And they handed me a check back for what I had paid. And they handed me a piece of paper with information on how to get the domain and everything. And then they gave me like a hard drive with all the clip art.
Hmm.
And I'm like, what are you doing? And they're like, listen, we've tried. We really don't know how to do this. I'm like, but you advertise in the paper. And they're like, listen, there's a disc you can buy called Microsoft Front Page. You can buy it at Staples. It's $399, and it'll teach you how to do it. And I'm like, but I've never done this before. And they're like, we've tried. It's very difficult, but if you can figure it out, please let us know how to do it ourselves. I was like, oh my God. And they and they told me I could buy it at Staples. Well, the closest Staples was in Waltham, an hour and a half away. So I get in my car, drive to Waltham. I buy this big boxed software that had this book in it. And I went in my basement and I spent the entire weekend and I did every single tutorial, something I've never done ever since then. And at the end of the weekend, I had my website. It was up and running. So I went to the first conference and then I updated. I had a news section. And when I came home, I updated that I was at the conference. I put like a picture up and everything. And then I went to the second conference and then I updated it. And by the third conference, some of the other performers were noticing, like, my God, your website, it's up to date. We are looking for something like that. Who's your webmaster? Because that's what it was back then, a webmaster. And I said, I don't have a webmaster. I'm doing it myself. And they're like, well, can you help me? And I'm like, well, I guess I could help you, but this is not what I'm looking to do. I'm on this whole journey. And I would tell people about how I was a chiropractor. I injured myself and I'm trying to figure myself out is essentially why I'm here. Yeah. But then by the time the conference has ended, I had a whole year's worth of work booked up, but I also had several consulting clients and I built them out websites and then that led to more business. So now I'm gone Monday through Thursday working at colleges. And then I would come home and on the weekends, I would work with my consulting clients. So after about a year and a half, I'd built up enough of a consulting business that I could get off the road. So now I was helping people build out their websites. But what I found is what they wanted for a website and what would actually work, like their bios needed to tweak. So I would help them kind of reframe what their image was and things like that. And then people wanted to be at the top of the search engine, which didn't even include Google then. So I worked with a programmer and we created one of the first SaaS search engine optimization companies called positionsolutions.com, where people would type in keywords and it would automatically get them to the top of the search engine. And it turned out that I had someone who was like a real estate management consultant. And so this is now like around 98, 99. Real estate was just coming to the web. And so he became an affiliate of ours and started telling people about our service. So it took off in the real estate business. And then the same other business that was taking off at the time was the legal business. So we had tons of real estate agents and tons of lawyers. So essentially, like for clients of ours, like if you were in Orlando homes for sale, you would type that into like go.com or Alta Vista, and our client would be the first 2 pages of links. Every link would lead you to their website. So it worked incredibly well. So that kind of led me into marketing, but I started getting bored. I wasn't having fun because, I'm now doing this for like a year or so. I'm living the dream of every entrepreneur. I'm in my basement. To heat things up, I would run the dryer. I'm working overnights because I have a team in India. And I was used to being on stage in front of like 700 college students screaming and having fun. So I kind of missed the entertainment bug. So I called some friends to find out what was going on. And I found out there was this new emerging business called product placement, which got products into film and television. And I'm like, that looks cool. So I ordered yellow pages from Los Angeles. You could order the yellow pages.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked up because the yellow pages weren't really online back
All
then.
right.
And I looked up these product placement companies and there was like 5 of them and I called them all. And these guys, they were great. They were former set
Mm.
designers. They knew exactly how to get stuff into sets. I learned all about the business. But when I asked them about questions like how many impressions and what types of reports they would provide for advertisers, there was none of that.
Mm.
So I saw an opportunity to kind of get client, provide the service, and then generate reports based upon it.
Mm.
And so I decided I was going to get into that business that I knew nothing about except for a couple of phone calls. But I had this service that could get anything to the top of the search engine. So I hired a couple writers to write articles about product placement and using me as an expert and interviewing me
Mm.
with my perspective. I used my own service. And so within about a month or two, anytime someone typed in product placement, I came up as number one.
Wow.
And so the first people who came calling were the press. So first I started being in the press. I was in the press a lot. And then I had like the Emmy organization reach out. And then I started being on panels at all these conferences. And I remember one panel I was at, I sat next to, it was me, Mark Burnett,
Mm.
one of the executives from Disney. And I was in way over my head, way over my head. And I stepped out beforehand to call my wife. And I was like, Cheryl, she's like, just talk about what you know, talk about the internet. Because back then, this was like around 2003. Everyone thought that the internet and digital in 2003 was going to be like radio. It was going to be something small.
Mm.
And I was explaining to them that for my clients then, when they were in a movie, people didn't know the name of the brand. They would search for Tom Cruise sunglasses online. So we would make sure that we would do a digital campaign to go along with it so their brands could be found. So I just spoke to what I knew. I had no idea that I was hoping that the internet would take over,
Mm.
which eventually it did, which was pretty amazing. So that then led to more clients. And then when clients would get involved with it, they would like, this is great. How do I get them to say the name of the brand more often and to use the product? And I would say, well, that's not product placement.
Mm.
That's branded entertainment. You have to pay a lot of money for that, like millions of dollars. And that would always be my pitch. And of course, everyone always said, no, I'm fine with the way it is. But I had a couple clients that ended up saying that's good. One of them was a large pharmaceutical company that had a sister product to Botox.
Mm.
Everyone knows Botox gets rid of the lines and then there's fillers. So this company was the only company in the US back in 2004. They had the only filler product on the market. And then they found out in 2006 that their competitor was now going to have a competitive product.
Mm.
And their competitor could outspend them by a factor of 10. So I created kind of a faux reality TV show for them and used that as a way to market their business, and it had incredible results for them. So that kind of led me into a different direction, kind of using some of the magic, if you will, of how to tell stories and use that to tell much, much bigger stories at scale.
Wow. Very cool.
Yeah.
So you're telling these bigger stories at scale, doing this with the product placement stuff, like getting all of that there. Like, where does that, I guess, because now you're doing with Provolytics, like where does that get to Provolytics specifically at this point?
So one of my clients had this issue where they were doing a lot of digital advertising. This is now 2007, 2008. And the numbers did not add up. They didn't make sense. And so they asked me to take over for the agencies. And one of my life lessons is I typically won't say no to something if I don't know how to do it. And I said to him, I said, listen, I don't know how to do this. I can manage the process, but I do know some of the top experts. So brought in the top experts to manage it or to do the actual buys. It quickly found out that there were a lot of problems. The biggest problem was that for every sale that there was 8 partners claiming credit who all wanted to get paid a commission. And the solution for that was to get what was called an ad server. And that was going to cost the client about $80,000 a month. And the CEO said, no, you have to find another solution for that. So at the time I was building out another piece of technology. So I had a whole team in India. So I took 2 people off of that and I said, I can figure something out. And I sketched something out. And within 2 or 3 weeks, I came out with something that solved that problem. And then every week there was like another problem and another problem. And by the end of 2 months, I had built out something that I thought was only going to work for this person. And I had a friend that I had a conversation with, and we always would catch up in terms of what was going on, like every quarter or so. And I told him what I had built. And then he called me back a week later, which he never did. And he said, hey, I talked to my buddy and I told him what you had built. And his buddy was the CEO of one of the largest advertisers in the US. And he says, I told him what you built and he called bullshit on it. He says, nobody's done that. That's the Holy Grail. And I said, oh, I guess I'm onto something. I didn't realize I was onto something until he had said that. So then I started talking to other friends of mine that were spending a lot of money advertising and see if they wanted to test it. And they did. I thought it was something that was just for one person. So that ended up being my first kind of, or second ad tech company after Position Solutions, called C3 Metrics. And that was very early on. And that became one of the first multi-touch attribution companies, primarily for very large enterprise clients. They're spending in the tens, the hundreds of millions of dollars a year. At this point, I was more prepared for it. And I built that company up to about 55 employees. And then I negotiated an exit for myself about a year before COVID. I'd spent 12 years in measurement thinking that I was done with that, thinking I would never go back. And then when COVID came, there were these massive changes to the whole ecosystem of advertising online, all around privacy. So essentially the system that I had built was no longer going to work in today's new world, which meant there was an opportunity to kind of rethink things from a different perspective 2 or 3 years later. So I approached it from a different angle, and that's become Provolytics. So I'm back in the same business I walked to the other side of the street, if you will, looking at it from a different angle. And I'm blessed enough to be working with some of the same people and some of the same clients, which is wonderful.
Yeah. What is it? Because you talked about how important it is for things to be fun for you. What is it that keeps Provolytics alive and fun for you today?
The most fun that I have is seeing and helping people negotiate the challenges that they face internally in their own organization. Because when you bring in new measurement, you just think about any big company. We sold X number of things from this thing that we did. Someone gets bonused on that. So measurement is at the core of how people get paid. It's at the core of how teams are built and structured, how budgets are set. So when you come in with new measurement, man, that's like a new religion. And in my earlier days, when I was building C3, I had experiences where a client internally would want us, his whole team would want us, but one of the vendors, one of the partners, was so worried about how they would look. They went to a board of directors member who they had known for years and got us fired. So I used to hate this process of helping to build consensus internally and working with all the vendors to have like as much of a kumbaya moment as you could. But now I really embrace that kind of stressful aspect. I look at it, I'm able now to look at it through, I guess I put my Dr. Jeff hat on, and I look at the organization as something that's kind of sick, that needs a healing touch, if you will, that this measurement is going to help them. What I always say is that our approach is less wrong than what they're doing.
Mm,
It leads them in a better, less wrong direction. And but it's painful for people, and it's important to let people express themselves and be heard and understand that, because you can't force people to accept it, but what you can do is hear them out and maybe try to find a win for them someplace. And I think when I was younger, I didn't see that. I was just like, hey, we've got the right answer. We're right, you're wrong type of thing. But as you get older, you realize, well, we can both be right, we can both be wrong, but we can also find there's a place here where we can both find a win. And sometimes, people are so shut down, they don't want to walk to that other side of the street. So you've got to kind of make the journey for them. You've got to do the legwork to see it from their perspective, and then dig through the shit, if you will, because the gold is in the shit.
mm.
You just have to find it. Uh, and I I like that process now because it's something that I don't think other people
Mm,
enjoy, but I find for myself, I learn more about myself, and it helps me better to identify, like that story I told you about the person who, with the way that they said things every day, irritated me, or helps me identify better those signals so I know not to approach someone and pet their dog when I shouldn't.
mm.
So it helps me navigate life better, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I resonate with that a lot because I work as a business consultant, and a lot of my job is very similar. So like I come in and I listen to what one person tells me the problems are of the company, and then I go and ask other people what their perspectives are in the company. And part of that job, to your point, is I've actually like said it before, where like I often feel like I'm more of like a business therapist, right? Where I'm coming in and hearing everybody out and being like, okay, how do we find solutions together? Because I align with you on that same thing, that like if there's it's an older saying of like where there's a will there's a way. As long as people want to solve the problem, there's a way to solve the problem. I can't do anything if they don't want to find that, if they don't care anymore, if they've given up hope, if they just want to leave, then that might be the actual solution. But like as long as people like want to find it, there's always a way to create these like win-wins for people, right? And to move those things forward. And it's a really tricky skill, especially I would imagine with the company sizes that you're working with and the types of egos that can be involved in those higher end places and stuff. I'm curious, like, what have you found that is like the magic for you in bringing these different people and perspectives together to move forward together in a new and better way?
I think it's just listening, and also understanding as well that there is there's listening, there's talking, there's us talking right now, but there's a deeper connection that's going on that can't be explained. People always ask me, how do you hire people to work for you and work with you? And I always I always say that, and this is true, is that I have to, you know, I'll go through and I'll look at resumes and I'll look online, and I I have to fall in love with someone in order for them to work with me. Because if you're gonna work with someone, there's got to be that respect and that love there. And I think that when you're dealing with someone that is angry and and doesn't want to see the way, the only way to really respond is you have to kind of fall in love with them inside yourself. And I don't know. There's something that goes on. It's like, have you ever like just thought of someone out of the blue, like someone from your
Hmm.
past that you haven't like thought about in 20 years, and then all of a sudden you you they call you or they text you, or my wife and I always say, don't mention so and so's name because you'll run into them, type of thing. So again, going back to what I said earlier, our understanding of reality is very limited. I mean, years ago, thousands of years ago, you know, we're not that much different than we were back then. Our bodies are still the same. We still dream just like we dreamed back then. But back then, we believed in other things. Somewhere we took this turn where we denied things that were unexplainable. There was a point in history where we said that we can figure out everything.
Hmm.
We can explain away everything. And that led to us being these rational beings that if I can't see it, if I can't taste it, if I can't smell it, it doesn't exist. And I think we're missing out on these massive parts of our history. When you think about the recorded history of humans, it wasn't that long ago when people were sick and ill, they would go to the temple and they would lay down to sleep because they would have a dream and the gods would come and heal them in their dream. That wasn't that long ago. Now, I understand, yes, we live a lot longer now than we did then and all of those things, but there's a part of that I think we forget that there is this, and we know about this from advertising and marketing. We know that there's an emotional connection to ads that is like a hook in people's brains. They've tried to study it, but there is, I think, a connection between two people or groups of people that you can feel. And when you send out the signals and you're open and honest with it, there's something that happens and you can get it back. And then there's this cross connection and it's magical stuff can happen. I keep going back to the magic,
Yeah.
but that's where real magic happens. I think all of us have experienced things like that, but we tend to like throw it out and we deny it. But the reality is that there is something going on there. And I think for me at least, I'm leaning in more with that than I ever have before, because that's the real magic in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I think beautifully put. I actually had a neuroscientist slash physicist on this show who was talking about like, the mysteries of physics, and how like part of what happens when you start to go in as a scientist is you're always taught all of these things that we know, right? Like gravity or these things that were measurable and whatnot. But then at some point you get into, what he referred to as like the mysteries, right? These ideas of quantum entanglement and how we know, for to your own point, how essentially like everything is interconnected. Like if you study the basis of quantum mechanics at all, you start to realize that like the act of noticing something changes it, right? And so, it's very, very subtle on those levels, but on some level that's all interconnected between all of us. So what we notice, what we pay attention to is having some sort of collective effect, both individually and at large scale. And there is so much more mystery. And I love that idea too, because I think there's that deep like humility, right? That also simply because we don't know something doesn't mean there isn't something there. And it also allows us we can do everything we can to rationally know, and we should use all the tools and the gifts that we have, but it allows us to stay open to other possibilities and that there are things outside of my particular scope and perspective and knowledge base that is way beyond something that I'll ever be able to comprehend while I'm here. So really appreciate that. We are kind of wrapping up at the end of the show now, Jeff. This has been just absolutely fantastic conversation, and I could go. I glad to have you on as a second time and dive into some of these other topics for sure. But one question I always ask for my guests at the end of the episode is just, what's one question that you might have for the audience that might have them consider something from the other side of the street, if you will, or have them consider something in a different way?
I'd say, and kind of joining in with that, that last, nice summary that you did, is I would say to the audience, what's stopping you from opening up to the possibility that there's more to life than you could ever imagine or ever understand beyond what you can see, feel, or smell.
Beautiful. I love that. Jeff, this is, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. Do you want to send anybody anywhere do you want to send people to stay in touch with you or keep up?
They can always find me on LinkedIn. You can also, I have personal website,
Mm.
jeffgreenfield.com. They can go there. I always love to hear from people that, that want to chat, other business people, even not business as well.
Yeah.
Totally cool with it.
Beautiful. Well, thanks again, Jeff, for coming on the show. This has been a blast, and we'll have to talk again soon. All right,
Absolutely.
cool.
Thank you.
Ciao.